Okay, hello and welcome. This is Dr. Charlotte here, and I would like to take you on a quick tour through the research paper guidelines here. There has been some confusion about when the paper is due, so I want you all to just be aware that the paper is still due the Wednesday of finals week, which is in December, December 6th, I believe, at 5 p.m. through Turnitin. So it is not due this week. What you're supposed to be doing this week is to get yourself started on the paper if you haven't started already, or get yourself a good thesis statement outline and start doing your research. So the first thing that you need to consider when you're picking a topic for this paper is that you need to find some form of Asian popular culture that you can actually go out and observe in Los Angeles. And so if you're not familiar with what exists in Los Angeles, you need to email me and I can give you some ideas. Some examples here, obviously there's a lot of K-pop fans. You can spend some time in Koreatown and you'll probably meet some, maybe going to the record stores or even some of the little gift shops, and you might be able to encounter some fans. You might even be able to encounter some on campus. Other topics might be interest in like Hello Kitty or other kinds of Japanese toys, boba, Korean beauty products, video games obviously definitely work. And these might be fans that you could, like I said, experience and talk to on campus at Dominguez Hills, or you might need to actually go out somewhere. Food would not be another option if you're interested in the globalization of sushi, for instance. You could go and do some interviews perhaps with people who are visiting a sushi restaurant, as long as you do not disturb the patrons. It is always kind of interesting to get those kinds of reactions from people in face-to-face interview situations. And sometimes if you're interested in restaurants, you might even be able to get an interview with the chefs or with the manager if you do enough sort of probing. One other thing that you should be aware of that's not on here, on the prompt or on the guidelines, is that sometimes ethnography is actually done online. So if you are unable to do face-to-face interviews for your project, or it just doesn't work or doesn't make sense, there are lots of ways to collect opinions and data online. And so you can do this kind of ethnographic study by looking at discussion boards or other kinds of like Tumblr feeds, places where you might be able to get a sense how fans are reading and interpreting these things. So for instance, if you were studying K-pop, you might want to go in person and investigate and find people who are fans of K-pop, but you might also be interested in just going to the places where K-pop fans congregate. That might be Tumblr, it might be even YouTube with YouTube comments. So those are all the ways that you might find some reactions from fans. And that's going to give you a much more deep kind of experience of how people understand this pop culture form. So most pop culture scholars aren't just reading books, they're actually talking with fans. So these are some sample questions, but you definitely want to tailor your questions to suit your topic. And if you're interested in having me or feel like you need me to look over your interview questions before you go out and do your interviews, I'm happy to do that, or happy to give you some suggestions based on your particular topic. So one thing that you should be aware of is that your paper should not just be descriptive. So papers in the past that you might have written might have like traced the history of something. And so you're just using sources and just basically giving a rundown of what other people have said about a particular topic. So in the case of this project, your job is actually to do some interpreting or some analysis. And you're eventually going to come up with an argument. Maybe it will take some time, some research first before you make that argument. But you're able to kind of use your own judgment on this and come up with an argument based on the things that you've read, based on your scholarly sources, but also based on your interviews that might say something about the globalization of Asian pop culture today. One thing that I would suggest is that you don't make your argument or your thesis too big. So we don't want to be too general, and we don't want to be too stereotyping of these things. So when we're talking about culture, we have to be very careful to avoid stereotypes. So rather than arguing that all K-pop fans are crazy or all K-pop fans are, sort of obsessed teenagers, you might make it more nuanced and discuss how, for the most part, maybe your argument could read like this: that fans of K-pop tend to be young consumers, and they tend to be, you might make some generalizations, but maybe you can add a twist, or maybe you can add something to complexify it. This might take some time, it takes some shaping, but the more you can make it complex and nuanced, I think the more interesting your paper is. One thing that I want to point out here is that your paper should be written in the first person. And so this is different from sometimes, like in an English paper or a history paper, you might want to leave yourself out of the equation. In this case, it's actually really great when you're talking about culture to acknowledge your own bias. You might even write about yourself. If you're a fan, you can explain, your own story, and that actually provides a lot of richness. You might even talk about your ethnic background. So don't make it too journal-like, but you can definitely position yourself and position who you are in relation to your topic. And when you're making an argument, you can say I. So you can say, based on my findings, I argue that something. So this last bullet point here is kind of important to me also, that it's not just me that's reading your paper. So you might not, you might find someone who doesn't know all of these terms that we've been talking about in our course. So you do need to spell out those terms. Even though I know what mukokuseki means, if you're using that as a term, you should define it, and you should explain which scholars use this term, and use your readings in order to help you out with that. That being said, you do need to have scholarly sources, and I would suggest that you start with the readings that we have that are related to your topic. And you might think, well, if I'm not doing Japanese pop culture, I don't need to use Iwabuchi or Yano or Napier. But actually, even if you're doing research on K-pop, it might be really useful to use Iwabuchi. Maybe his concept of recentering globalization is really relevant to K-pop, because it's actually reorienting where the power is, where cultural flows are flowing from. The fact that so many, maybe even white Americans or Latino Americans are consuming K-pop really reorients where cultural power is emanating from, and that is Korea now, not necessarily just Japan. So you might use Iwabuchi even in a topic outside of Japan, just like you might use some of the other theories that we've learned outside of those contexts. So those are the scholarly sources issue. In terms of sections of the essay, this is going to be kind of a easy outline for you. You will have a introduction, body, conclusion. It's a very short paper, but I want you to be clear. I want you to be concise. And the more you can make each sentence and each paragraph really have a function, the better your writing is going to be. So the more it kind of rambles on, it will be very hard for your reader to figure out what you're trying to say there. So the first draft often is very rambly, and that's the job of the first draft. But then the second draft, you can get to something that's resembling this kind of organization. So you have almost like guideposts, so that your reader knows where you're going. I did post something on Blackboard that will give you guidance to structuring a good paragraph. And this comes from the Walden podcast. It's very, very good. I really enjoy that whole podcast, but I picked a couple that I thought you would all benefit from. One is the how to construct a thesis statement, and the other is constructing a perfect paragraph. I would suggest listening to both. So this is the rubric. In general, if you look the context, so you're going to be providing background to your particular subject. You'll need to have some quotes from our readings there. If you feel like you need extra sources, then let me know and I can help you find those. I'm very, very happy to help you with finding sources. And so you're going to provide some background. And then you're also going to be providing that observational component. So the observations that you've found either online or in person. And then the other stuff is kind of like more mechanical. So your writing style itself, and also just being able to get the formatting right, all of that stuff, not plagiarizing, etc. And then this is sort of just bringing everything together in a cohesive way so that you're making sure that it makes sense, that there's a clear statement that you're trying to argue. So you've got a checklist here, and I think that should be fairly straightforward. So I look forward to working with you all in the coming weeks as you're getting this together. This is a large percentage of your grade. And there is a website component in which I will be giving some instructions, I will be providing an audio description of the instructions, just like I am here with the research paper guidelines. So look forward to that when I post it. And again, please do not hesitate to email me, and I can help walk you through some of these steps. Because this is a large percentage of your grade. Hope this was helpful for you, and I look forward to being in touch. Okay, bye-bye.